Hi, so today I wanted to talk about lobbying support services. In addition to the actual lobbying that advocates do at the executive and legislative branches of government here in the state of California, there are also important support services that are provided to lobbyists, either by their employer for those lobbyists who work for an individual company or a trade association, for example, or by their lobbying firm for those who are contract lobbyists. There are actually some firms, mainly in our nation's capital, that work to support lobbying efforts, such as managing coalitions, directing grassroots campaigns, conducting public outreach and awareness efforts, or other indirect strategies and tactics to enhance or promote the direct lobbying efforts. There are just a handful of public affairs firms in Sacramento to do the same type of work. Additional efforts, either in-house or from a public affairs firm, could include helping to organize your lobby days, gather research and data, engage in educational efforts, planning receptions or events, or even creating materials to help the lobbying team, such as background papers, research studies, polling, letter writing campaigns, etc. There are some other firms in town that also specialize in social media lobbying, including developing websites and other social media efforts to help support your lobbying efforts in support or opposition to measures, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, or other forms of social media to help impact decision makers and their staff. They also have firms here in Sacramento, as well as in the nation's capital, that do strategic communications and public relations, and some of your traditional media, TV and radio spots, letters to the editor, op-eds, opinion editorial pieces, etc. So whether it's created in-house or by a contracted firm, the development of advocacy support materials is definitely an important role for those involved in and engaged in lobbying efforts. For example, drafting letters of support or opposition, as well as developing talking points and what we call one pagers or leave behinds, whether it's researching legal issues, constitutional ones, legislative history, can all serve as important support services for the direct lobbying activities. And frankly, these indirect activities can often make the difference in a successful lobbying campaign in the legislature in California or with an executive branch agency or department. In addition, whether you're advocating for or against legislation or regulations, building a broad-based coalition to advance your efforts will hopefully, and in most instances, likely help your clients' lobbying success. It's important to have a coalition to make your advocacy efforts successful, especially if the bill or regulation is controversial, or it may require lots of additional work to get adopted, for example. Leading a coalition, working with a coalition is often very impactful because elected and appointed officials and their staff want to know whether, for example, everyone in an industry or everyone who is similarly affected by legislation or regulations cares one way or the other, that they all support the same policy position for or against a bill or a regulation. So often it's important to bring together a broad and diverse group of interests to help promote the direct lobbying efforts, the day-to-day wearing the shoe leather, wearing out your shoe leather, going door to door at the Capitol or office buildings where legislators have their offices, testifying in committee and elsewhere. While there's certainly many bills or regulations that don't require as much outside support efforts, there are always issues that require the proverbial heavy lift that are often better served with coordinated direct and indirect lobbying activities. And grassroots organizing is another valuable avenue to support lobbying efforts. This can be done through phone calls, emails, letter writing, obviously in-person or Zoom visits to decision makers and their staff. Public support is often needed to help persuade lawmakers or appointed officials that either legislation is needed or that the agency officials appreciate that a rulemaking effort is needed. As such, I think communicating with groups at local levels is very valuable to demonstrate to officials and their staff widespread support for your direct lobbying efforts. There are also instances where strategic planning is really necessary to try and prepare and capitalize on any opportunities to advance your client's lobbying interest or prepare for potential adverse impact to your client's interest or their industry. And preparing for either the upcoming legislative session or the proposed rulemaking calendar of an agency, department, or other entity in the executive branch means planning your efforts and determining the right timeline, anticipate potential changes in strategy or tactics, being able to respond to those changes that might be necessary, and of course, ultimately modifying your, again, strategic plans or your tactics that you're using in your direct and indirect lobbying. So whether you're utilizing public relations, grassroots, or any of the myriad of other means to support direct lobbying efforts, both the lobbyist as a quarterback, in my mind, often of the campaign or the effort to be successful in the regulatory or legislative lobbying campaign. And of course, your client are going to need to determine all the possible tools that may be available to you to utilize in your legislative or regulatory campaigns to support or oppose legislation or propose regulations. As you might expect, a well-developed and executed strategic plan will have evaluated both the use of direct and indirect lobbying activities to help increase your chances of success in your lobbying efforts.